were little brothers coming into prison saying, man, OG, I put in work. I held down the hood. I represented for you. And I started asking these little brothers, like, how much time you got? I got 99 years.
Oh, my
I got
goodness.
75 years. And I felt indirectly responsible. And these little brothers didn't know. They were 17 years old. They didn't know that I was abandoning that idea. I actually denounced the game while I was in prison.
Yo, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of the It's Needed podcast, where we discuss real issues of law enforcement in the community. It's your boy Ryan Tillman, founder of Breaking Bears United, and I'm joined today by the light-skinned wonder himself, Mr. Oh No with Stopopo.
What's up, brother?
Oh, man, it's another day, bro. It's another day, another dollar, you know what I'm saying? We're also joined by the savage himself, Billy Stuckman. What's going on, Billy?
How's it going? I always love seeing the responses from guests when he says light skin wonder. Like, I always love that.
I know. And Anton was probably thinking, like, he's black?
Everyone always
That's exactly. Oh, okay, I see.
That curveball.
Everyone always just cracks up. It's hilarious.
That's why the intro is the way it is. So there ain't no questions after the intro.
So if you guys in here, we do have a special guest on today. My brother from another mother, Mr. Antong Lucky. What's going on, Anton?
Hey, man. Hey, I'm happy to be here, Brother Ryan.
Man, I'm so overjoyed with happiness to have you here. You know, but we might freeze out a little bit every now and again, Anton, because AJ got bootleg internet, but
no,
don't mind his
He gonna
internet.
see who freeze. He gonna see who freeze. It's all right. The people know, Ryan.
Yeah, whatever.
The people know.
No, so, but anyways, Anton, just a little bit quick how I met Anton. Last year, right after George Floyd incidents, I had met my other brother, Bishop Omar, and Bishop Omar, rest in peace. I've talked about him many times on this podcast, and let me just talk about a world changer Bishop Omar was that. And so one of the things that Bishop Omar had prior to him going home with Jesus Christ was he had started this Heal America tour, which was really shaped and molded into going out and bringing people together to go out and share a message of healing. And so that's where he brought me in contact with Leon and so many other tremendous people. And one of those people was Anton, who's like a brother to Bishop Omar. And so Anton, I've been following Anton for a while. We actually have never got to sit down. We sat down. Matter of fact, I take that back. We did sit down at breakfast in Atlanta. And let me tell you, these were the best muffins that I have ever had in my life. And not only that, it was like it was like what's it called when you get something right before like the meal, like
appetizer?
An appetizer, bro. Like, but you didn't have to order it. It's like that. It's like the bread. Whatever, y'all.
You know, it's like a pre-meal.
Yeah, whatever. It was like the bread. You know how they send you bread out? Well, their bread was muffins. So you didn't have to pay for this. And so, man, it was blueberry muffins. It was in Atlanta. Oh my goodness, bro! I almost got full off these blueberry muffins before my chicken and waffles even came. So, but anyways, we sat down over that breakfast and we were having a great conversation. So we've had a little bit of good conversations, but I wanted to bring Anton on the show because I think he has a really good message to share and story to share. But not only that, I think we can all learn something from him. So, Anton, man, appreciate you being with us, brother.
Oh man, I wouldn't be anywhere in the world except here right now at this appointed time.
My man.
So I appreciate you. Yeah.
My man. And please forgive me. I am eating my double smoked bacon and cheddar from Starbucks.
I was going to say, this is a professional production.
Very professional, bro. That's what happens when
you hear me smacking all in the mic.
When you do it right, man, you can do that.
Oh yeah.
So
hey Ryan,
go ahead.
Apparently.
My assistant, right? I'm known for eating peanuts on the Zoom, and she do not eat peanuts. It's a professional record. Do not eat peanuts. She just warned me that.
Hey, tell your assistant that I'm good with you eating. Tell your assistants you can eat all the peanuts you want in the world.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This is family right here. This is what we do.
Already.
Yeah.
Like
our listeners are family.
I feel like peanuts is a little more risky than a sandwich, though, because you can hear the...
So, hey, well, if you got your peanuts, man, do your peanuts. What on a serious note, before we get into it, we do briefly current events, and one of the current events I want to talk about was I went to a funeral of the fallen Sergeant Vaca, which was he was a sergeant here locally where I live, and just tragic way he passed away. A couple weeks ago, it was actually I think it was May 31st. It was Memorial Day, May 31st. He was chasing some guy on a motorcycle, and as he's chasing this guy on a motorcycle, the guy gets off the motorcycle, and there was a little bit of a time gap between when he caught up to the guy on the motorcycle. So anyways, he walks up on the motorcycle. The guy had already dismantled and was somewhere else. And so it sounds like this is just a story I got. The guy was lying in wait and ended up shooting the officer in the head and killing him.
Wow.
And so I've been to many police officer funerals before. They never get easier. And this one was very, very difficult like all the other ones. But one of the things that really stood out was two things, actually. I was doing honor guard, and at the beginning of the funeral, they had all the honor guards there from all over the world, or the country specifically. And the honor guard for that department, they escort him in with the casket following, and then right behind the casket is the wife and two daughters of the fallen officer. Wow. And they walk right past me, and so that hit me on another level because I was just imagining my wife and three kids following my casket. And so that really touched me. And then at the very end of the funeral, they do what's called like a last radio transmission, your last broadcast, where everybody turns up their radios, and they'll basically give you a tribute. The dispatcher will give you a tribute to do your final, man. Your final, gives me every time, your final broadcast. And so not only was that difficult, but what made it more difficult is his daughter had recorded a message, and I'm actually going to play that. Matter of fact, I'm just going to play it right now. I hate to start this podcast on a somber note, but I think it needs to hit home with people, and this really hit home with me. So I'm gonna play this final broadcast, and then we'll kind of start the rest of the podcast from there. So I'm gonna play it now.
David Vaca was fatally shot on May 31st, 2021, while answering the call for duty. He gave of himself while serving his community with courage and valor. The men and women of the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department are forever grateful and proud to have served with Sergeant Vaca and will never forget his ultimate sacrifice. All units, break for a moment of silence.
My dad was a deputy sheriff for 17 years, and he protected people he didn't even know, just like he protected me, my baby sister, mom, and all our family. He taught me to be brave, kind, and always take care of my family. On May 31st, my dad showed up to work, a job he loved. He was brave, kind, and took care of his partners. Dad, I remember the lessons you taught me and share them with my sister. I love you forever and will miss you every day.
Dominic, may you rest in peace knowing.
That was
Wow.
that really touched me. And death is hard. I was talking to my wife and kids about this, actually really more so my wife. And death is hard no matter how you look at it. If you die in a traffic collision, if you die from, health reasons, cancer, whatever it may be, COVID, it's hard. But to be murdered is, I think it's a little bit more difficult, because when you're murdered by somebody, it really just makes you think like, man, like, because of somebody else's actions, I'm no longer living, and it basically took him away from his family. So it was just difficult. Like I said, I hate to start this podcast on that somber note, but it's a reality of the job that we do. It's a reality of life, the world that we live in. So I just really want to pay a tribute to Deputy Vaca, or Sergeant Vaca, and all those that have also lost their life in line of duty. If you don't know this, but law enforcement line of duty deaths are up again. And a lot more by gunfire. So it's not like it used to be. It used to just be traffic collisions. We're killing officers galore, but gunfire has overtaken that. So that being said, man, if anybody needs help, anybody needs prayer, anybody's going through some tough moments or whatever, please feel free to email me or AJ or even Anton or Billy for that matter, and we'll pray for you for sure. So, all right.
For sure.
So you guys got anything on that before I move forward?
It definitely doesn't get easier. I mean, like you said, like I'm in the honor guard. I've done multiple funerals myself, and between that, the 21 gun salute, the presenting of the flag. So for those of you who don't know, there's normally a flag that's covering the casket, and at the end, the honor guard professionally folds that flag and then hands it to their significant other or next of kin. You know, there's so many aspects of like an officer involved funeral that just it'll get you every time.
Yep.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. Just stay safe out there. You know, remember why you took this job despite like everything else going on in the world. And just continue to do what you do and that's go out there and, you know, try to bring a positive change to the world.
Absolutely. So, well,
Yeah.
cool. That's cool. Did you have something, Anton?
I want to say something too, man, before we get started. I just, just this initial opening and then me just knowing what you do, Ryan, AJ and Billy, man, I want to commend you brothers, man, for your voice, man, because what you're doing is what the world needs. And I look at you guys just in this first 5 minutes, I look at you guys as an extension of the voice that this culture needs, man. I watch what Brother Ryan does. I watch his videos for perspective every day. And I like it because you're bringing balance and making sense of what most people have trouble making sense with. And you got to have that voice that emerge that puts people to understand the human element of what we're dealing with. And so in the work that I do, our organization do, we are akin to what Ryan does in his work. And so, we brothers, man, I appreciate you brothers for what y'all doing. I just want to say that off bat, you guys.
Oh man. Well,
Otherwise,
Anton,
yeah,
that means the world to me and AJ and Billy, so, and everybody else that's listening. So I think that's a good transition, man, to kind of just get in and focus about you, man. This episode's about you. And so what I would like to do is start off by Anton just telling us a little bit about yourself, where you come from, and we'll take it from there.
Okay. Let's just dive in. I am Antong Lucky. I'm the president of an organization called Urban Specialists, which was founded by our late CEO, Bishop, who Ryan talked about earlier. Bishop Omar was a cultural change agent. He was my mentor, my spiritual guide, and he cut his teeth on addressing the violence in urban communities, the violence that's committed us by us, he cut his teeth on that and mending those divides that's happened in communities, to most recently using that same skill set to bring people together on a national level. So that's Bishop Omar and our organization Urban Special spent 21 years doing exactly that. But more so about me, I was born in South Dallas, East Dallas, Southeast Dallas. Let me make sure I say that because it's only divided by the neighborhood. So, but it's South Dallas, but our section is East Dallas. So I better say that before I get some calls about that. So I'm born in East Dallas. I was born to a single mother. My dad was sentenced to 50 years in prison when I was 9 months. He ultimately did 37 years in prison, and here getting out recently. I was a straight A student growing up in my neighborhood. I was a talented and gifted student. I enjoyed making good grades. Because my father went there, school became my refuge, and that's where I flourished at. And so I enjoyed coming home, making good grades, showing my parents, my grandparents, who were my primary caretakers. I was just like any other kid, man, just happy about school, wanted to learn, suppressing a lot of stuff that I was dealing with as it relates to my father. But something else happened for me as a kid. The neighborhood which I grew up in, the name of the game was survival, y'all. So it was this survival attitude, like only the toughest. It was just, you had to be tough, you had to be all this, right? And so as much as I loved going to school and loved being a great kid, I was confronted with this neighborhood idea in my neighborhood, this violence idea. You had to be tough. And so every day going to school and from school depended on how fast I can run or how good I can fight, because these kids in other neighborhoods, they had this same idea that we were enemies, that we had to fight each other, that, and it was crazy, right? And so for me as a kid, I had to make a choice. Do I want to continue getting those good grades, or do I defend myself? And doing so, I think what happened to me, I began to amputate my personality. You know, I had to become somebody else. You know, I had to become tough. And so my neighborhood would fight all these other neighborhoods, right? For no reason, just because on contact. And these kids stayed 1 mile up the street. And we had this, and it was this idea of just hatred towards each other that I never could understand. I could never understand how kids could be this cruel and this mean, and that we had hate, and I didn't understand it at the time. And so the turning point for my life happened when I was in junior high school. These kids wanted to fight me for no reason. And so when I get to school, it's a whole 30 or 40 kids waiting on the schoolyard to fight me because I was from another neighborhood. And as I was walking up the hill to the playground, this group confronted me. I heard someone say, "Shoot him." And this girl, a friend of mine, jumped in front of me because we didn't see what was going on. There was a bunch of commotion. And when she jumped in front of me, somebody shot. And they hit her. Shot her in the stomach. And I think it was at that point, man, that all of my empathy, all of my everything just dissipated, right? And so from there, me and a couple of friends of mine, my cousin, at that particular time, it was gangs were popular back then. So you had all these Crip gangs in Dallas. You didn't have no blood gangs. It was all Crips. It was right at the time that Colors had just been released, the movie Colors, and we intuitively knew that the Crips was into it with the Bloods. And so me and my cousins and a couple of friends started the first blood gang in Dallas. Oh, wow. And we vowed to be like we vowed to be like the most ruthless, violent gang in the city. That was our pledge, you know, to represent our neighborhood, to defend our neighborhood. And so we did that. And from that, my life spiraled out of control. You know, I had so many confrontations, encounters with police. And at the time, I thought that they were just picking on me. And so I thought they were picking on me. And so that confrontation became an everyday thing. You know, I was in and out of juvenile, all the way up into a judge. I was standing in front of a judge, expecting to go home. And that judge looked at me and said, "You're a menace to society." And he sent me to prison.
Oh, man.
And I remember standing in the courtroom saying, "But Judge, that ain't me." You know, in my mind, I was having this conversation like, everything that you read out, I had to do this. My neighborhood said that I had to do this. That ain't who I really am. I just put this on to survive in this violent neighborhood. I was having this whole conversation in my head when he sentenced me. And so I ended up going to prison. And I never forget, my introspection started from that point, because I was saying to myself, how can you go from a honor roll, talented, gifted student to being called a menace to society by a judge? I went into prison like that. And so when I got to prison, y'all, at a young age, and because I started the first blood gang, which had grew exponentially from the time we started. Like, it grew. Some that I didn't plan for, but it grew. Like, it grew. And everybody was paying homage to me and a couple of my cousins, right? So when I get to prison, it was kind of weird. I was 20 years old. And all these people from all over, brothers from all over, man, was kind of like, it was weird, because it was almost like they were idolizing me for that. And so, and it felt weird. And so one day, probably a couple of months into my sentence, this older inmate, he had been there 15 years at that particular time, approached me one day leaving the chow hall. And he walked up on me and he said, "Little brother," he said, "let me talk to you." And he said, "Little brother, man, I've been paying attention to you." He said, "Man, everybody in this prison pay homage to you." They fall out of place. They do whatever you ask them to do, right? And then he said, look, brother, if you have the ability to lead these brothers to do wrong, you have the same ability to lead them to do right.
Wow.
He said, you're a leader. And I had never heard that before, right? He said, you're a leader. Other than when my grandfather told me when I was a kid that I would be a preacher or a leader or something like that. And it resonated, right? And I was like, wow. And so he said, brother, you have a responsibility to lead these brothers the right way. And so that inmate began, his name was Willie Fleming. He began to be my mentor. This guy started giving me books to read. And I started reading these books. And I realized how much I didn't know. And before long, me and the librarian became friends. And I was reading everything under the sun. I was spending 15 hours a day at the table reading. And instantly from that, over the next course of the year, I began teaching in prison. I started teaching. And so, I was teaching, addressing a lot of stuff that was going on in prison. And I was fortunate enough to have money on my books, right? Fortunate enough to have money on my books. There were little brothers coming into prison saying, man, OG, I put in work. I held down the hood. I represented for you. And I started asking these little brothers, like, how much time you got? I got 99 years.
Oh, my
goodness. I got 75 years. I got a life sentence. And I felt indirectly responsible. And these little brothers didn't know. They were 17 years old. They didn't know that I was abandoning that idea. I actually denounced the gang while I was in prison, something that you don't do. I denounced it in prison, because when you denounce it, then that makes you an open target. But I was so convinced that I had to do something different, that I had to change and all that good stuff. And the stuff that I was reading, I was educating myself. I denounced that I didn't stop. I denounced the idea. I said, I'm no longer a gang member. I no longer affiliate. And so you had these brothers coming up to me. So I felt bad behind that. And so fortunate, I had money on my books. And so whenever I spread, in prison, it's so segregated by race and gang. You don't mix with nobody. You don't mix nobody white. You don't mix nobody Mexican. You stay together with your own gang. And that's how it is. It's separated. And so as I started to educate myself, and I'm going through my transformation, whenever I cook or have somebody to cook, because I had money on my books, it was customary in prison, and I'm gonna wrap this up, but it was customary in prison that when you cook, whatever left over, you throw it away. You don't give it to nobody else. You throw it away. And that was just something that I didn't understand. And so what I started doing, whenever we cook and we had leftovers, I would look around the day room and see brothers who I knew didn't have money on their books, who only could eat the chow hall food. And I would just walk over to them and give them a bowl of food. Here, man, every time. And so, this white guy that happened to be the leader of the Aryan Brotherhood, I would give him food. The Mexican guy, I give him food. The Crip who hate my guts, I would give him food. And through that, right, that wasn't planned. That was just my heart saying, they hungry, feed them. That was God working on me, right? And so through that, I started having conversations with these brothers, right? So you'll see me in the day room having a conversation with the leader of the Aryan Brotherhood. And brothers used to be like, man, what's going on with Luck? Luck is tripping. We would have these conversations, or they would see me with a Crip, somebody who supposed to be my enemy. We having conversations because now I'm in teacher mode. And what I started realizing from those conversations was that a lot of us had a lot of commonality. That society and these labels has separated us, right? So the Aryan guy who I'm sitting, my guy Jeff, he the head of the Aryan. I'm talking about he had tattoos all over, he had swastikas and everything all on his face. His whole head was tattooed, whole body tattooed, right? But as we started developing a relationship, I saw that, man, we at the core of it, we human beings, and we put all these labels on us to sometimes protect us if we scared, or sometimes to ward off people. But at the end of the day, we were all the same. We were all big. Just like I had put this label of being a blood gang member on me, I did that. I could resonate because I did that because I was trying to protect myself, and protect my neighbor, at least what I thought, but it's really about protecting myself. And so I started seeing that commonality. I started seeing the commonality with the Crip dude, who we had the same story. And so it was so powerful that these relationships became so strong that before long, I had 15, 20, 30 brothers, hardened criminals, sitting on the rec yard who would never, ever come together. We sitting at the table, talking about life. We talking about philosophy. We doing book clubs. This in prison. Wow. And understand me, I didn't have a plan for this. It would just happen. It wasn't like I said, this is what I'm gonna do. It was just happening like that. And so after a while, it's like for me, everybody wanted to be around me because I was the only one bringing that inspiration and that positiveness and that brotherness. And we got to stop our, I had brothers who had real issues with the prison guards. Like they hated the guards. And I would have a conversation with brothers like, look, hey man, that sister or that brother just doing his job. They ain't the reason you here. You have to work on the reason you here. If you spend your time mad at him because they doing a job, then you miss the point of dealing with the reason why you here. You gonna come back here. You have to work on. And so it was like these kind of conversations that I became known for around. And this was a maximum security prison. So those kind of conversations I became known for in prison. I started teaching in prison. I was teaching a class in prison. When I started teaching, it was like they had to close the lieutenants had to close the wings down because everybody wanted to come. They just wanted to come hear from this brother who was a gang member who was now teaching. And so, and that's how it happened, right? And then one day, right, in prison, when the Stories is on, One Life to Live, General Hospital, and all the rest of those shows, in the day room, you better not make a sound. It's quiet. You better not make a sound. I mean, brothers is glued to the TV. If you make a sound, that could be very tragic to you, right? And these dudes, they knew like what would happen next week and the week after that. And I ain't never understood. I could never get into that. And so when the news came on, it was chaos. And I said, these dudes do not want to hear about what's going on, but they so focused on the stories, right? And so one day, right, I'm in the day room and the news came on. And it was quiet this day. It never had been quiet when the news came on. And on the news, it was Omar Jawar. I didn't know Bishop Omar then. He wasn't a bishop, it was Omar. And he was in my neighborhood with two of my cousins who started a gang with me. And they was talking about gang intervention and stopping violence in urban communities and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, whoa. And so immediately I wrote a letter to my cousin and said, hey man, whoever that guy you with, connect him to me. Not knowing that my cousin was telling Omar that if you want to do anything in this neighborhood, you got to get with our cousin. He just in prison. Wow. And so it was crazy how that happened, man. And so a couple of months later, man, just a testament to how it was in prison, man. When I got ready to leave prison, probably a couple of months later, after I seen that newscast, the whole prison, I mean, these were grown men. I was 20. These dudes were 40, 50 years old, 60 years old. Man, they literally cried like babies when I left that prison. They cried. I'm talking about, it was customary that you go to everybody's cell and bid your farewells. They told me, look, just go. It's not going to be the same. Just go. Don't come to my cell. I'm talking crying. And that's when I knew it was something different, right? And so fast forward, I got out. My cousin introduced me to Bishop Omar. He told me about his idea of stopping violence in the urban communities and really dealing with that. And when he finished, I pulled out something I typed in prison, and it was everything he said verbatim. And we just looked at each other like, man, this is God, man. Let's go to work. And so for the last 21 years, we've been doing that, working in communities, addressing the violence. We cut our teeth on that. And here most recently, 2016, when that tragic incident happened in Dallas where those officers was tragically murdered, Chief Brown, who was the chief of police, who was chief of police then, called on Bishop Omar and said, I need you to help me calm the city. And so July 9th, that happened July 7th, July 9th, we called a meeting with police officers, community leaders, the activists who put on those protests, business leaders, and we did a private meeting, man. And when I tell y'all, this meeting was so tense. We didn't allow media in the meeting, but this meeting was so tense, man. We had two white friends who had cameras that we allowed in. They was in town from St. Louis, and we allowed them in, right? When I looked over at them 15 minutes into the meeting, they face was red as beet. And it was intense. And so it was so intense, right? But me and Bishop Omar led that meeting. And at the end of that meeting, you had protesters, police, you had everybody hugging and crying, man, saying that we gonna work together. And we really believe like that was the reason that Dallas didn't go into riot mode and all that good stuff, that it really, and after that, we began these conversations with law enforcement that we did directly after those meetings, where we met with community and police officers, and we had these conversations going, and we had just, that work ended up becoming the basis and the origin for our Heal America work, Ryan. Where we started doing these conversations that started out as local conversations that Bishop Omar led, but end up going into like national conversations. And so in January of 2018, on the heel of that, and I'm gonna be quiet after this, we brought together this very diverse group of law enforcement. Just highlight, particularly, we had Alton Sterling's family, and we had the widows of the officers who were murdered in Baton Rouge. That was Tranisha, Tanya Garfola, and Brad Garfola. We had their families on stage with Alton Sterling's family, which sparked the situation that happened in Dallas. And man, it was just, Bishop led that, bruh. That was a powerful moment, man, where these sisters came together, man, and they had never met each other. And they became, to this day, they are sisters. And I remember very, very distinctively Tanya Garfola, who husband was a Baton Rouge police officer kid. She said, she told Andrika, who was Alton Sterling's kid's mother, she said, I remember my husband used to, because she worked at Home Depot. She said, I remember my husband used to go to Home Depot, and he used to tell me that he had a black girlfriend at Home Depot. And he was talking about Andrika, Alton Sterling's kid's mother.
Wow.
And that happened on stage, man. And we've been in contact with them and in connection with them ever since. But it was just things like that Bishop took. And one of the things I've neglected to mention, when I got out of prison, the first thing, when I told Bishop I wanted to go back and help my neighborhood, the first thing he told me was, well, we got to go over to your rivals, the Crips, and make amends with them. And I remember looking at him and saying, hey, bro, I didn't think that far. That wasn't part of my plan. And so I said, you want me to go to them who last saw me shooting at them? I said, man, you gotta be crazy. And but Bishop convinced me, man. And I found myself in this neighborhood where I was a rival, asking the OGs over there. I remember this how it happened. When I was in some apartments with Bishop Omar, who looked like a college student at the time and had no street credibility. He convinced me. And I remember we knocked on the door, and when they peeked out the blinds, it was a drug house. All you heard was guns cocking. And they slung open the door, and I said, Lord, I know you're not going to let me die like this.
Not today, Lord.
Not today. Bishop Omar said, he wasn't Bishop Omar, he was Omar boy. Then he said, put your hands up. He said, put your hands up. So we in the middle of the apartment with our hands up, and Bishop Omar started talking, right? And I was like, God, please don't let me die like this. Please. I'm going to serve you. And Bishop started talking, right? And as Bishop was talking, he kept talking, and them dudes they started lowering their guns. And I said, man, keep talking. Don't stop, keep talking. That's what I'm saying in my head. And they lowered their guns, man. And he told them, he said, man, we come in peace. He said, man, we want to work with these kids. We want to give them a different trajectory. Just please give us a chance. And this brother Anton come in peace. He come in peace. And them brothers heard it, man, and they gave us a pass, man, and that became the foundation of our work. So we started negotiating these gang truces with different gangs that became our work. And so Bishop used those same skills. He felt like if it could work on that lower level with gang members, I could do this on a national level. And so that's kind of how Heal America started. And Heal America just have grown into us going around the country, finding people who have these differences, bringing them together, say, man, let's find the commonality. Let's see what the commonality is. And so that's how we met Ryan. That's how we met Leon. It's been just phenomenal just watching that grow, because we believe that violence cannot be the primary language. We also believe that a lot of times you have to have a sensible voice in the culture that has that proximity, that's close enough to be able to understand the nuances of what's happening. Most people are talking from up here, but they're not close enough to see what's happening. And so we've been doing that. I've most recently, before the pandemic, partnered with the Caruth Institute and been doing training with our DPD police officers, recently promoted sergeants, which have been one of the best trainings they've got. But it's been a ride, man. I'm happy to be on this ride. I'm happy to see you, Ryan, and the stuff that you're doing, man. I know how important it is. And so I just pause right there.
Man, Anton, you this is already, I could tell this is going to shape up to be another one of our most powerful episodes that we've had.
Yeah, for
There's
sure.
just so much to unpack. I mean, and I'm sure AJ's the same way, and Billy, as I'm listening to you, I'm just thinking like, man, this is it. Like, this is the answer. And we've known this, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
if we can have these difficult conversations amongst each other, this is where
right.
healing truly starts. But yet something so simple we make so
right.
difficult. And it's
right.
because nobody wants to get out of their shell. Nobody
right.
wants to get out of their comfort zone. They want to just stick to their side. I'm on the left or I'm on the right. I'm over
right.
here. That I'm not even going to want to have these difficult conversations with a brother, and all to find out that my brother
right.
or sister is a lot like who I am. And
exactly.
so, like, when you're talking about in the jails, in the prison, how you're having conversations with people that, nobody would actually expect you to have these conversations with, that's
right.
kind of what needs to go on outside of the prison, where
right.
you're bringing
right.
when you're bringing Alton Sterling's family with the officer's family, when you're having the conversation with George Floyd's family and vice versa,
right.
that stuff is so important, and law enforcement is just as guilty, if in my opinion, of not trying to reach out to people on the other
right.
side of the spectrum just as much
right.
as the other side of the spectrum is guilty as well. And so it's funny, I had this conversation, and I'll turn it over to AJ.
Yeah.
But I had this conversation yesterday with the person, and I was like, one of my pet peeves is when I go on calls for service sometimes, and I'll hear other officers, say, oh, man, that dude is an idiot, or oh, that dude is like, the person will do some type of crime or whatever, like, oh, this dude is just, they'll basically start overly criticizing this person, and I'm guilty at times of being like, this dude's just a freaking clown or whatever, but that's because he did something stupid or ignorant, not because I'm judging them of who they are. But
right.
one of the things I've said is that, and one of the things I always try to catch myself with, is that you don't know why they're in this position in the first place. We don't
right.
know, when we tell a kid, hey man, go to college, get your education and stuff like that, how do you expect them to go and do that if they don't even know what that looks like? And
right.
so,
exactly.
That's why I always say, it's so important to, put away your identity for a second and understand their identity. And then once you understand their identity, now they can get to know your identity, because you've now been able to empathize with who they are first, and now they're willing to hear from you. So there's just so
right.
much to unpack. AJ, I know you got some notes too.
Absolutely.
Go ahead,
Absolutely.
man. But this is Anton, man. I have to thank you again before we get off this podcast. I got to thank you right now, because, man, you had just really blessed my day and made my day. Just the work that you're doing, man, and the what you're committed to doing.
I appreciate you, bro.
So probably about like 3 or 4 years ago, a really big media outlet here did a story on my life. And I'm talking about they were digging up stuff that I didn't even want dug up, right? Like, they were like trying to find my dad, and I ain't talked to this dude in 10, 15 years, right? And they were like digging up all these records, trying to find him and interview him. They interviewed my mom, next door neighbors, people that I grew up with back in the day when I was involved in some stuff that, Anton, you was talking about. Then they, interviewed a lot of people in my current life, and it was a 30-minute segment, I want to say, and it was on the front page of the Dispatch, and then it kind of went into like the middle of the Dispatch and had like 2 pages. And I say that to say that it was a lot, but my favorite part of the segment was at the very end, where I talk about the way that I was raised, the way that I see life, and the lens that I look through, and how a majority of the community that I serve tend to look through that same lens because we've had the same experiences. And at the very last part of that segment, I'm talking as the credits are rolling, I'm walking with a kid dribbling a basketball, and I say something to the effect of, I know what it's like to be in your shoes. You no longer have to live your life like this. And as we're walking away, we're just talking, right? And it's kind of like a voiceover, right? Like you hear my voice say that as we're walking through. And it's my favorite segment because I identified an issue and then I identified a solution. And in your story, Anton, I don't even know if you realize you did this. You did that exact same thing. Earlier in your story, you said, like, you don't have to live your life this way. And then you went on to explain what worked for you, which was a conversation. So a lot of our listeners are police officers, okay? Are young people looking to get in the field of law enforcement. And I just really want to bring that home. Like, you have individuals from different walks of life who are coming in here who have never had a conversation a day in their life, telling you the exact same thing that works over and over and over again. And that's what? First, you have to identify the problem, okay? Like, even if you work in an area where you don't understand the culture, you don't understand why people do what they do, there's a way around that, right? You have a conversation. Hey, and that conversation could be this. Hey, I understand that you just did this. I don't understand why you did it, but there are other ways to obtain the solution in which you were looking for in this situation. And then you build that relationship. So I just want to commend you for not only your testimony, but for sharing that powerful story on this platform, because I do feel that a lot of police officers lack understandings of certain cultures and demographics, which is why you see a lot of clashing and whatnot. And I'm not saying which side is right and which side is wrong, but it's very powerful for even me to hear your story and your testimony. And I hope that a lot of our listeners walk away with knowledge and motivation and go out here and just be part of that solution and part of that change that the world needs.
Man, I appreciate it. That's dope. And let me say something to that, man. And that's why I appreciate what Brother Ryan, Brother AJ, Billy, what you guys are doing, because you need that voice. Ryan said something at the Hill America Chicago that was very important, because I use it in my trainings when I do my training with law enforcement. You said, Ryan, you said you was talking about you and your wife, and you talking about how in Black culture, you talk loud, and then your wife was thinking like it was an argument. And so even in my trainings, right, first of all, when I do my law enforcement training, because it's how to engage in community, addressing implicit bias, before I go into my training, and these are all sergeants who have been recently promoted. Well, we've been recently promoted to sergeant, and they being dispatched to urban neighborhoods, right? And it's 98% white. And so what I do is my presentation is me in my white prison suit. That's what they see when they first walk into the class. And they have all my, my gang stuff and all that stuff. And so before I even come into class, I let that sit for 5 minutes. So by the time I come to class, everybody's red. Like, what's going on? Well, I'm talking about in the stirs and everything, right? Because I know that in their mind, they're saying he coming from this slanted perspective. But by the end of the class, all those officers are hugging me, loving me, and they have to do these blind studies, these blind surveys, man, and they highest remarks whatsoever, right? Because it's not from a biased perspective. Like, for me, I could be the person who has every angst and every grievance against police officers. Many times I've been arrested and been down to IA and filed complaints and all this good stuff. I even had situations where officers have slandered me personally that I could have sued the department, all that good stuff. But I didn't, I didn't, because I understand how important this relationship is. And I understand how you have to look at this from a balanced perspective. And I tell community, like when I do these trainings in community, I try to get them to understand that law enforcement is not no monolithic idea. Like everybody's not in conspiracy against you. You know, that's what I tell the community. Like you look at police and you think every police is the same, blah, blah, and it's not.
We ain't that organized.
It's not.
We couldn't even pull it off if we wanted to.
Yeah, and I said, that's the problem. And then when I do these trainings, I tell the officers, like, the urban communities in which you police are not no monolithic idea. I said, so you can see a young person, because what I tell them is, if you don't never do a background check on what's going into your brain, if I'm an officer and understanding the algorithm, if I click on a video of a black person shooting an officer, the algorithm gonna feed me every video from across the country of that. Yep. And nobody never stops to say what that does to the psyche. Yep. And so if I'm a black person and I look at a video of an officer shooting an unarmed black person, the algorithm gonna send me that from all over. That's all gonna be in my news feed. Yep. But nobody never stops to say what that does to the psyche. And so whenever they intersect, both people have that fear. So whether I'm an officer with a badge and a gun, or if I'm a person in the hood with a rag and a gun, at the end of the day, we want to go home. But it's that fear that motivates us to where when we see each other, that if we don't understand, like you're saying, if we don't have the proximity, we don't understand each other, and we foreign to each other, then that fear is escalated, right? One thing I understood, I posted an article when I was 13 years old. Somebody sent it to me, 12 years old, actually. They used to have the police athletic league. And it was an officer, white officer. It was the only white officer in the black neighborhood named Tim Harshbarger. Wherever you Tim at, I salute you, brother. Because Tim was my first introduction to policing. This dude we were some little bad kids. You got to know that, right? we were bad. But Officer Harshbarger never, I'm talking about as bad as we were, he never responded to that. He always encouraged us. He would come to our house if we missed practice, because he had the baseball league. We playing baseball. But he stayed committed to that, man. I mean, he went over and beyond, right? And I have so much respect for him. I have so much respect for a lot of officers. But I could be jaded. That's why I like what you're doing, Ryan. That's why I like what you're doing. And you may not think it's an impact, but it is. You just read a letter that someone said how it changed their life. And so I encourage, we have to continue to being the voice and being reason to people, because most people read the headlines. They never read the fine print. What you're doing is, and what this podcast does, is read the fine print. I listen to everything that you post, bro. Everything you post, I'm on it. And I'll be saying, boy, that's my brother there. He is on it. And you can't deny the truth. I mean, it's easy to make an assumption and a quick judgment without having all the facts. But man, we have to learn in this area of fast reporting and everybody getting it out. We have to learn this skill set of waiting to get facts, because when you paint one picture with a broad brush, you hurt innocent people. You know, I tell community that, you know, you have an officer who became a police officer to represent their neighborhood and to help their neighborhood and protect their neighborhood and police their neighborhood. And then when you paint them with this broad brush of all officers want to just kill and these false narratives, you hurt that individual. You sweep this individual into that narrative. And now you ostracize and make this individual feel some type of way, or vice versa. If you're an officer and you look at the community and you can't make that distinction between this kid who probably needs a prison minister versus the kid who just looks like that kid that needs a prison minister, then that can be detrimental. And I think having these kind of conversations and people like you all who are constantly provide context to these narratives is what this world needs. That's how we heal America.
Man, you know, it's so funny. Me and my wife went to a party yesterday, and it was a black couple. And the reason I say that is because we were having a deep conversation about, you know, what it's truly like being black in America. And I use that for, you know, what I'm about to say. you know, I like to say me and my wife are doing pretty well as far as the success we're having as a family and just doing things the right way. And this family, same thing. They're doing a middle class family, upper middle class family, doing really, really well. And it started off as a joke. It's just funny. Like I was talking we made a joke about how I was in the grocery store a few weeks back with my kids and my wife wasn't there. And it's funny how people just look at you like, oh my goodness, like, you're actually there. You're in there. They're in their lives. Like, oh, like you're doing a good job as a dad type thing. Like they would make little subtle comments, and in my mind, I'm thinking like, am I not supposed to be in their lives? But in their mind, it's like that stereotype that they automatically. It's weird seeing that a black dad with their 3 kids in the store by themselves and their mom not around. And so the guy I was with was able to resonate because he does something for his daughter, which was it's a very, very cool thing. Is every Valentine's Day, all the dads, and it's majority black dads, they take their daughters out to on a date for Valentine's, and they like get them all dressed up and they do little tea party stuff and stuff like that. And so they always get crazy comments to say, oh wow, like, you know, this is interesting, like, or like this is like, it's good comments, but just you can see where their mind is at, is like, this is not common. And so I was telling them, I was like, one of the frustrating things about this whole situation that we've been living on this divided world is, as an officer, sometimes my partners don't understand what it's like to be black. They just don't, just because, and I get it. They've been in situations, and you know, sometimes they'll downplay because like, oh, you know, well, I've been the only white guy in a black community and stuff like that. But that might have been a moment of your life. That's not every day of your life. And what what they don't get is like, for my whole life, you know, I'm always either the one or two second black person in a room that's predominantly filled with white people. That in and of itself makes you feel a certain type of way. And so you always have for the majority of life have had to adapt to how people talk or what they say, or have to dress differently or be differently in order for them to recognize you as being not the typical black man. You know what I mean? And so they don't understand that part. And there's no fault to them, they just don't understand it. But on the flip side of that, one of the frustrating parts is I use this example. Me and my wife went to Orlando about a month and a half ago, and when we're there, this is a nice resort. We paid pretty decent amount of money to stay there. So when you pay a decent amount of money to stay at a place, you expect a decent type of service and the ultimate experience, right? So we get there, and there's a lot of black people there at the pool, but they like cussing each other out, cussing the manager out, going off on each other, fighting in the area and stuff like that. And in my mind, my wife just looks at me and she's like, what's wrong? I was like, I'll tell you later. And I'm frustrated because I'm like, man, you have this nice pool, there's a whole bunch of other races there, but there's a whole bunch of black people. And then the next night, same thing. We pull up to the resort after we get back from Disney World, and there's like 4 cop cars outside, and we get out, and there's all these black folks yelling at each other, going back and forth. And I'm like, see, this is what makes me so upset, is because on one hand, I try to tell people that I work with, like, man, like, it's difficult, you know, being the only black person sometimes, or it's difficult trying to adapt. It's difficult when you guys look at the George Floyd and don't understand why the community is feeling the way they are. And I'm not saying that you should understand why I feel the way I do, but all I'm saying is empathize. But on the other hand, it's hard to say some of those things when all they see is when they go to places, some of our race acting crazy and going, and it's like, and I'm like, man, this is why there's a stereotype that exists. And so we just had this interesting conversation, and I bring that up to say this is like one of the things you highlighted on during this discussion was that you need to have conversations with people in general, so that way you don't pigeonhole everybody into a certain category. Because that is where we find our fault, is that where you start to assume that everybody is the same when we're actually not. When we're actually individually different in many different ways that you wouldn't even know unless you had a conversation with. And so that's one of the things I valued most about the Hill America tour is when you actually came on that tour, and when you actually came to one of those events, you would see people from just the most different walks of life having a conversation. And during that conversation, we would all find out that we are more similar than we are different. My brother Leon, anybody that can be mad about police, it could be Leon. Leon was shot 5 times by an officer and is paralyzed. Whether or not whether or not people think it's justified or unjustified, it don't matter. That man could be mad at police and he has a pass. Like, if that man did not like police, I would give him a pass, because I understand you're paralyzed from the waist down. And so that he, out of all people, said, you know what, I always tell people, if they are mad about what's going on in the public, go out there and be a police officer and change it. You know what I mean? He's sitting down having conversations with police officers. He's forgiven the officer that shot him 5 times. If he can do it, why can't we? If you can do it, why can't we? If AJ can do it, why can't we? And that's got to be the mentality, is like, we have to be able to put our pride aside, humble yourself, and be able to get to know somebody that you wouldn't typically go out and get to know on your normal day-to-day basis.
Man, and Ryan, you spot on with that. I mean, that's the solution right there. You know, I have a lot of police officer friends, I have a lot of white friends, and we have these conversations all the time. And one of my disclaimers is this: look, if you can't say exactly what's on your mind, because I'm getting the challenge, the stereotypes, the generalization. I said, if you can't say, we all have them. If you can't say what's on your mind, then you're being disingenuous to me. And if I can't say exactly how I feel, what I think, then I'm being disingenuous to you, because I understand that when people say exactly how they feel, how they view, that's where the medicine at. That's where the education happens at. But if we play like everything's okay and we don't be honest and forthright when we having conversation with each other, the basis of Heal America, then we can never get to the healing in the medicine of that. And that's the education of that. And so we got to be able to have these conversations where it's not an indictment on a people or a race or a profession, but it's an acknowledgement that we need to do something different. Man, my uncle is the chief of police, right? My uncle.
Wow.
This is my dad who was sent to prison. And my dad was in prison 37 years, so I never get to meet his side of the family. I met my uncle at a law enforcement and community gathering that we were doing after the shootings here in Dallas. Right? He came. He was a chief, and my dad happens to be there. Right? They hadn't seen each other, and so my dad and they look exactly alike. Right? They look exactly alike, and so. When we had this family reunion at one of my community gatherings, right? Where we had police and community. And so my uncle says, because he don't know me. He don't know me because he never had no communication with me. And so when he found out my name, he says this. He said, man, I remember 25 years ago, man, when I was a beat cop, he said, man, in the department, if we could arrest you, that was a big fish. We could never catch you. That's my uncle.
Wow.
And he didn't know that I was his nephew, man. You know what I'm saying? But you know, but I say that to say that to go back to your point, we gotta have these conversations. And Ryan, we have to be the one that continues to have these kind of conversations where we bringing us together and addressing the prejudice that we have. Because a lot of us, it's not racism. Everything ain't racism. We can't say everything is racism. Sometimes it's just prejudice. And you get prejudice is a set of ideas that you get from a group when you see what you witnessed at that hotel. So you become prejudiced. You be saying, okay, this is a certain view of these people. And so the only way you can deal with prejudice is you got to have conversations with many people, and you got to constantly ask yourself and constantly challenge what goes into your head, because you can, just like you seen some black people acting a fool, I'm quite sure some black people have seen some white people acting a fool, and that drives their response. And so as long as we keep having conversations to know that it's not a monolithic idea, that everybody, and what'll end up happening is when we looking at these shootings, whether it's police shootings, whether it's community versus police shootings, when we start looking at that stuff, if we understand prejudice and how we develop those prejudices from the stuff that goes in our head, the images we see, we then start to look at stuff on an individual merit base. And that's what we're trying to get our society to, not to paint. Because I think when we paint it as racism or racism within the department or whatever, however we report it out, it further polarizes and divides us. You feel me?
Absolutely.
We got to quit doing that. We got to start being able to look at this stuff.
Because that's the stuff, honestly, that makes people, you know, and that's what I'm trying to get away from too, is either making, like, I hate that, you know, everybody will pigeonhole all black people to be one way or say one way or talk one way, or like, you know, it's the funny ones. I'm sure you guys can relate. Is like, man, you don't talk like them. Like what does that mean?
Yeah.
So like, but again, that's a prejudice that's kind of been, it's a broad brush. When they say stuff like that, they don't even realize what they're doing sometimes, but it's a prejudice. But on the same time, it's the same aspect of not every white person you meet is racist. You know, stop making white people feel bad for being white.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
And so we have to get to that place as individuals where we can have a dialogue and just talk about have these difficult conversations, but walk away feeling more connected and understanding that it's okay to be different. And I think that's at the end of the day where we got to get to is how can we, and I always use my marriage as an example, is like men and women are just we're wired differently. And we will have, you know, we will see things completely different. But it doesn't necessarily make us wrong. It just makes us different. And so the faster we can agree to disagree, the quicker we can move on. And so, I think there's going to be more agreements and disagreements, but you will never be able to get to those agreements until you have those conversations. You know, the problem is we don't want to have the conversation. That's the problem.
Right. And we have to be able, we have to have the courage to face our own cognitive distortions. Like for me, as many times I've had brush with police officers, I had to say to myself, man, you were wrong. You were wrong, and I had to accept that. I had to face my own cognitive distortion. See, because I can have a slanted distortion. Man, they picking on me. They just hate me because I'm black, and is racism. But I had to own up and be accountable to my part in the equation and say, nah, you were wrong. Yep. You know that every police officer is not the same, and you know that. So quit acting like that. Man. So what end up happening is this narrative of police versus community have become so weaponized and so polarized that we can't even address the violence that's happening in our own communities because we feel like
talk to them.
And so you got to understand this. On Thursday, right? On Thursday here in Dallas, we doing a protest in front of the Dallas Police Department headquarters in conjunction with police, because we have officers. We've been meeting with the chief who will be there. We will have mothers of who have lost their kids to violence that committed by us to us. We're gonna be standing saying we can stand and holler and protest violence when it's committed by somebody in a uniform. Then surely we can stand and protest the violence that's committed by somebody who looked just like us. And we asking the city of Dallas to stand with us this Thursday because I believe that's important. I believe that we can't be paralyzed by this national conversation that's weaponized, that we can't even address the stuff that's happening in our community. And so I don't want to hear that stuff about, man, black on black, and that's a word they use. I don't care about that. I'm saying that I'm standing with this mother. I'm standing with a 4-year-old who was shot 2 days ago. A 4-year-old that's on crutches that was shot 4 days ago because somebody didn't value life. And we got to address that. And so I got mothers that's coming together. I got officers that's coming together because I believe that it has to be a new conversation where we partner together to say we got to address this violence, and we can't be pigeonholed by the weaponized of. Now I'm not gonna say that. I might catch some flack if I say what I'm about to say. But y'all understand what I'm saying.
You know, man.
Y'all understand what I'm saying.
I'm gonna end on this last story, and I'll get to AJ for closing thoughts and Anton. But one of the things you mentioned right now is accountability, and you know, we're human, and so as humans we're gonna make mistakes. As humans we're gonna get in our flesh sometimes. And I remember when we went to Disney World, again I'm bringing all these examples up from Disney World. I'm like, man, y'all had a crazy trip. But I remember
just flexing on us. You just want us to know you went to Disney World. That's all that is.
No. So when we were there, it was one of the hotter days that we were there. And as we're standing in line, my wife, she was like, you know what, we're waiting Jungle Cruise. I'm gonna take the kids on another ride. I'm like, all right, cool, no problem. Go do your thing. So I was like, hey, I should push the stroller. Let's park the stroller before I get in line. She's like, no, just keep it with you. I'm like, no, I'm gonna park it. She's like, no, just keep it with you. I'm like, all right, whatever. So then we get to the midpoint of the line, and now I have to get. She's not back yet because she's with the kids on another ride. And so I'm like, I gotta park the stroller. But then that means I got to get out of line, and now I'm going to make some people mad when I hop back in line. So in my mind, I'm thinking like, see, I told you so. See, like, you know, this is why I said I should just parked it, but whatever. So I tell the Disney worker, hey, look, man, I'm gonna get out of line real quick, park my stroller, and hop back in line. I've been in line. He's like, all right, yeah, no problem, do your thing. So I get out of line, park the stroller, and then I go back to where I was, or general area where I was. So now I'm in front of a different person and behind a different person, and so this one guy is like, hey, no, man, you can't stay in here. Like, you can't just cut like that. I'm like, hey, bro.
At your neck.
Yeah. Oh, I'm like, hey, bro. Like, and he literally, like, he was very short. So he was literally at my, like, my neck. And he's with his girl. And so I'm like, hey, bro, like, I'm not cutting. Like, seriously, I just had to go put my stroller back. It's not that big a deal. He's like, no, man, you can't cut. I'm like, hey, bro, I'm just letting you know. I did what I had to do. I already told the dude, the worker, and I'm solid. So he's like, nah, man, that's wrong and stuff like that. So then I get up in his face. I'm like, look, bro, I'm gonna tell you one more time.
How did we not hear about this?
Oh, I know, right? I don't know how y'all didn't hear about this. I was like, look, man, I'm gonna tell you one more time. I was like, you need to get off my back right now. If you need some clarity, I was like, if you need some clarity,
catch these Disney hands.
Hey, yes, exactly. I was like, if you need some clarity, go talk to your boy over there, because if not, you're about to get dropped. So he said, I went from no longer breaking barriers to I'm about to break faces right now. So anyways,
right.
So
showing out.
I was hot because I started, again, it's hot outside, it's humid, people are frustrated waiting in line. So then he starts like yapping, and his girl was there. So I'm like, hey, so I felt bad. I was like, hey, look, little boy, you need to go ahead and sit down somewhere. So like, I'm like calling him out a name and stuff. I wasn't cussing out or nothing like that. So anyways, the dude, he asked the worker, like, hey man, did he talk to you? And the worker's like, yeah, man, like I told him, he's good. So I was like, exactly.
Chill.
So go sit down, little boy, with your little girlfriend or something like that. So
everybody little.
And it's funny because the people behind him, I'm not gonna say their race, but it's just funny. They're like, let's just say they look like Billy. They're like, oh my god, oh my goodness. Like, they're like, oh my god. Like, they're like getting all afraid and getting nervous because I'm getting hostile with them, right? And so, anyways, I mind my own business, my wife, and I'm hot. I'm pissed at this point. Like but again, I had to calm down. And so as we moved, like 15 minutes later, I turned back around to it, and God, the Holy Spirit, was just like, seriously, Ryan, you just gonna act like that? You just really gonna act like in front of all these people? And so I was like, you know what? So I turned back around. I was like, hey, bro, I want to apologize, man. I shouldn't have been calling you out a name like that. My bad. Like, hey, even though I knew I was here, I could understand why you were getting upset because you thought I was just cutting. That's not me, bro, so forgive me. And he was like, hey, man, I was actually going to come up to you and apologize as well. I shouldn't have came at you like that and stuff like that. But the moral of the story is, like, man, we were both able to drop our pride, hold ourselves accountable, and make amends on something where, from a humanistic standpoint, man, I was ready to go toes. The problem is that we are too prideful as men that we don't want to drop our pride, and we want to just, I can't be the guy to say, oh, nah, the police were okay in that one because it's going to make me look wrong amongst my group of friends. Or as the officers, oh, no, I can't be the one to step out and call something wrong amongst officers because now people are going to look at me different. No, what's right is right, what's wrong is wrong. And the moment we can, come to a truce on that, then that's the moment we can move forward. So AJ, give us your last parting thoughts, man. Anton will end with you, and then I'm going to end with the positive message to take us home.
So I'll just share a really quick story that happened yesterday, actually. My wife's cousin got married, and my wife was in the wedding. So, my wife left super early. They were doing like the pictures, the whole thing. And my wife texts me the address, and she's like, be here at 5 o'clock. So I'm like, all right. So, I get all suited and booted, go down there, and it's a predominantly white wedding. I think there were like only 3 minorities at the entire, event, right? So I sit down, I don't really know nobody. And luckily for me, they had like a sweetheart table, meaning my wife could actually sit with me, so I didn't have to sit there and be awkward, right, with all the rest of the random husbands of the females that were in the wedding party. So she comes down, sitting there, we're eating and whatnot, and she made a comment, and I was like, yeah, I can't wait to hit this dance floor. And sure enough, they opened the dance floor, and the first song they played was like a Leonard Skinner song or something like that. And I just busted out laughing. I looked at my wife, and I was like, babe, like, I don't know if I'm ever gonna get used to white weddings. And she laughing because like we had this conversation before, because when we get married or we go to like weddings, it's one of 3 songs they playing, right? It's the Cupid Shovel,
the wobble,
the cha-cha slide, and the wobble. That's it. It's one of 3, and the dance floor is popping, right? And that's what I was expecting. So it's some Leonard Skinner, like Freebird or something came on. I just started laughing, like, I don't know how to dance to this. Me and the wife were kind of going back and forth and whatnot. And she's like, well, just come out here and dance. I was like, babe, I can't dance. Like, this ain't me. I can't dance to this. I can't get jiggy with this. But, long story short, she actually pulled me up on the dance floor, and we ended up dancing. And a majority of the wedding was like that, right? Like, they were playing country songs, like classic rock songs. And we just danced and had a good time. And I share that story with you in hopes that it translates into your profession. So like if you're in law enforcement, or even if you're not, like, step out of your comfort zone. Like, that's a culture that I'm used to, not specifically the wedding aspect of it, but I stepped out of my comfort zone. I was on the dance floor. I was having a good time, and it was all love, and it was positive. I made friends by the end of it. We're dancing, we're taking pictures, recording videos on Snapchat and whatnot. And just think what your life would look like if you practice that every single day. If you stepped out of your comfort zone and made it a point to have a positive interaction with somebody that maybe you're not used to talking to.
That's good. That's good.
Wow.
Anton, man, what you got for us? And while you give us your closing thoughts, AJ or Billy, man, give us a one as to go, because I want to do one with Anton if we can. Go ahead, Anton.
I guess if I had some final thoughts, I would say this, that the one part is not the sum total of the whole. And that's a literary term. And what I mean by that, we gonna encounter those individuals who may not understand the work that we do. That's a part of this, but they don't represent the whole. So those little incidents that we have, we run into people who may be displaying some racism or some prejudice or whatever the case may be. We have to understand that they don't represent the whole, whether that's the community, whether that's law enforcement, that they don't represent the whole. They're just a part, so they don't represent the whole. And so we got to keep reminding ourselves that every day, so that we don't be pigeonholed into thinking and broad brushing a whole system, right? And then that'll just be some people. And so I would say, let's continue to fight for perspective, because what you guys are doing, Ryan, Breaking Barrier, AJ, Billy, what you guys are doing are phenomenal in this whole space, bringing this, like I said, I look at the videos, and one thing I like about Ryan is, he about accountability too. And so one of the things that Bishop would always tell us is that only inspired people can inspire people. That's Bishop Omar. Only inspired people can inspire people. And so I would just say to you guys, continue being an inspiration to not just your platform, but being an inspiration to the world, because the world needs to hear your voice. They need to hear that perspective. And as long as you continue to work on your end, I'm going to continue to work on my end. And I appreciate you guys. So I would like to just a moment of silence for all the officers who've lost their life to this senseless narrative, and all of the innocent brothers in community who've lost their life to this senseless narrative, that we honor them, man, because they are the casualties of this. And so they are the reason why we continue to work and fight to bring about a change, not just in our communities, but in the world, man. This world changing work that y'all are doing, I don't take it lightly. I love it. I'm a big supporter. And before I go, I want to just tell y'all this funny, quick little story. Back in the day, before I changed my life, I used to have this black shirt with police on the front. Y'all remember the black shirt with the police on the front?
Yep.
I used to get good discounts too. Like I used to get discounts, man. I used to walk in there, cause back then I was kind of buff and stocky, right? So I used to walk into dentist, man. I get a discount. I used to walk into the point place, and so one night, right, I was riding down the street in an Escort. It was a long time ago, and I saw something out of my peripheral, but I didn't know what it. I just felt like something was a car on the side of me, but I was just in a zone and I was driving, right? So when I pull up to the red light, I see something moving and I look over. It was this white guy. He was like super drunk. He had a bottle and he was like this, about to chunked the bottle at me.
Oh.
And so when I looked over, I leaned over like this, right, to see what was going on. He hurried up and got back in the truck and squared up and drove off, right? It was like 4:00 in the morning. And so I'm trying to figure out, like, what just happened? And as I'm riding, I looked down. I had the police shirt on. That was funny. Well, thank y'all, man. Thank y'all.
That is too funny. Anton, man, I can't thank you enough, man. This is another powerful episode that we've had, and man, this really just made my day. It's so much more to unpack with this conversation that just means one thing. That means we're going to have to have you on again, because I think there's definitely a need for part 2. All the things that you've done, all the changes you've seen, and so where can our audience find you at?
Okay, on all the social media. First, go to Urban Specialist on all social medias, urbanspecialist.com, joinhillamerica.com, and then my personal stuff is Antong Speaks, ANTONGS Speaks, Antong Speaks on all social media, man. So check us out, follow us, man. We're a great family, breaking barriers. So we definitely broke some barriers today, man. I really appreciate you guys.
Yes, we did. And we're gonna have all that stuff in our all of this contact in our show notes as well.
All right.
Just a real quick one has to go, since y'all was talking about the
hold on. Before we get there, I want to finish one thing else off, and then we'll get to that. So we'll have Anton stuff in our show notes, so please make sure you follow him. Anton, we'll be keeping Thursday in prayer, man. That's a powerful protest.
Thank you.
It's one that needs to be expanded, and please let me know, man. I want to get back to work with you guys, man. I want to keep the work going that you guys had going. So let me and AJ know. I'm sure AJ will be a phenomenal asset to that Hill America tour as well. And then I want to read this quick message, and then we're gonna go to One Has to Go. But the other day, somebody sent me a message, having a conversation with them, and this is what they said. It said, "Thank you so much for your response, brother. I'm currently rereading the policy." Okay, where has it go? So it says, also, side note, I want to thank you and AJ personally for opening my eyes to faith. I've never opened that door before, and since I have, it's been eye-opening. It's like a weight has been lifted off my chest. Without you guys, I would still be closed-minded towards that. So thank you guys from the bottom of my heart. I say that to say this, as anybody listening to this podcast right now, whatever you're going through, trust me, I'm not one of those guys that's a Bible thumper and go tell you, hey, look, you need to do this, you need to do that. I'm telling you from my own personal experience. I tell people a lot that I would not be able to do this job unless I had a relationship with Jesus Christ. And the only reason it is because it brings things into so much perspective. I am no longer asking questions of why that guy raped 3 people. I'm no longer asking the question of why this guy went out and killed all these people. I no longer ask that question because I have understand through Christ that there's things that I'm just not going to understand, but he also gives me a peace that surpasses my understanding. And so it's in Christ Jesus that I find my peace. And so I tell you that to say this: if you are struggling right now with addiction, if you're struggling with going out on your spouse, if you're struggling with pornography, whatever it is, you can find peace and closure through Jesus Christ. And this is not a ploy. This is real life stuff. So I appreciate that person that said that. Keep walking with God, man. He will be there every step of the way with you. Suicide is the number one killer for police officers, and that's because they can't find the closure. So we're chasing other things, trying to find that closure. And so I want to give you guys, let you guys know, I'm going to pray real quick. Dear Heavenly Father, I ask that you be with our fans, our listeners, anybody that's listening to this podcast right now that's going through some type of struggle. I don't know where you're at right now. I don't know what you're going through, but God has a specific message for me to give you, and that's to stay in the fight, stay in there. Do not waver, and just realize that he is there every step of the way with you. Even though you turned away, he has not turned away from you. He will never leave you nor forsake you, and he's never done so even to this day. So he loves you, and he just asks that you would stop wavering, stop putting one foot in and one foot out. Just jump into a relationship with him, surrender everything to him, and he will change your life. I love you and thank you for it's in your son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen. So put your faith in Christ Jesus. You'll get through it. And with that, AJ, take it into One Has to Go. So Anton, what we do is One Has to Go. He's going to list 4 things, and each of us is going to basically say one of them has to go forever. If we have forever, like you can't bring it back.
So since y'all was talking about how good these muffins were in Atlanta, I'm gonna go ahead and say muffins, waffles, French toast, or pancakes. One got to go forever.
Muffins, waffles, French toast, or pancakes.
Mm-hmm.
Waffles.
French toast to me. gotta
Oh
go.
no.
Same. Yeah, French toast got to go for me too.
French
yeah,
toast gotta go,
Anton, man,
Yep.
we supposed to be bro, like brothers,
Yep.
like brothers.
Hey, I love waffles.
Yep.
I love pancakes.
Yep.
And I love muffins.
I'm gonna say
And
the
muffins
gotta
are
go.
you could travel with them. Like you could take them in the car with you and eat them on the
Nah.
go. Yeah.
Pa-
Chicken
pan-
and
Especially the
waffles.
blueberry.
There
Wouldn't be chicken and waffles if you got rid of waffles.
Have you guys
Pancakes
ever
are a
had
staple.
French
So.
toast like dipped in Fruity Pebbles or cereal,
Oh,
man?
bomb.
Crunchy.
Oh, here we go. Billy, what you got?
Muffins are overrated.
What?
Oh, overrated.
Wow.
He didn't even say they gotta go. He just
You can eat the top of the
Insulted me.
muffin and throw out the rest, you know?
sometimes you're right, but it depends on who made the muffins.
Yeah.
Hey,
As Ryan has a muffin right
Hey,
now.
look at that
y'all see what
blueberry
I
muffin,
got?
man.
Y'all see what I got?
Oh.
Hey, pancakes gotta go while I eat my muffin right now.
Pancakes? What?
Pancakes
bro?
gotta
How
go,
you
son.
doing
Pancakes.
Pancakes
Man,
gotta go.
pancakes are a staple.
You can't have chicken and pancakes, so let's just get that right.
You can't eat it with chicken. You just don't want it.
Muffins is we all know
Pancakes
muffins
and
is
peanut
bomb.
butter.
Oh
Yes.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
oh for sure.
No,
And
y'all
Pancakes with
Pancakes and peanut
anything,
butter.
bro.
Oh,
You
my
can't go to
goodness.
pancakes.
See, here we are talking about uniting folks, and now all of us divided and stuff. So, you know what? I can't mess with y'all. But anyways, man, I love you guys. And as I eat this muffin, I just want y'all to know that we are with y'all through everything. So, Anton, thank you
All right.
again, my friend.
Thank
AJ,
you, guys.
it's always a pleasure. Billy,
Yep.
love y'all. We'll see y'all next week.
Already.